All right, let's dive into a topic that's captivated, well, pretty much everyone for all of human history. We're going to get into the science of attraction.
You'd think this is a simple question, right? But the answer? It's surprisingly specific, and it's backed by some really fascinating science. We're going to break down exactly what captures the human eye, and more importantly, why.
See, the secret isn't just in one place. Attraction is this complex puzzle. And today, we're going to look at the three biggest pieces: our ancient evolutionary programming, the wild chemical reactions happening inside our brains, and, of course, the powerful influence of the world all around us.
To really get this, we've got to go back. I mean, way, way back. Our brains literally evolved to hunt for very specific signs that signaled health and the ability to have healthy kids. And believe it or not, those ancient preferences are still running the show today. Now, you might think our instincts are all about overall body size, but the science actually points somewhere else entirely. It turns out our brains are hardwired to notice a very, very precise structural feature, and it all starts with the spine.
That's right, there's a magic number. A 2015 study from the University of Texas at Austin found something amazing. Men consistently rated a lumbar curve, that's the curve in the lower back, of exactly 45.5 degrees as the most attractive. And get this, it was true even when they changed other things, like the size of the buttocks.
So why that specific angle? What's so special about it? Well, it was like an ancient billboard for function. This exact curve told our ancestors that a woman could physically handle the demands of pregnancy much better. It was a crucial, unspoken signal of a strong, successful mate.
Okay, so let's move on to the next evolutionary clue, which fits right in with this idea. You've probably heard of the waist-to-hip ratio, or WHR. It's way more than just a measurement. It's another powerful, nonverbal sign of someone's health and fertility.
And again, a number keeps popping up. Across dozens of studies, all over the world, in all kinds of cultures, one number just keeps appearing: 0.7. A waist that's about 70% of the hip measurement is consistently seen as the most attractive. And the reason is simple. That ratio is strongly linked to higher estrogen and the best potential for having children. It's like a mathematical shortcut for finding a healthy, fertile partner.
So the big takeaway here is that these two small areas, the curve of the lower back and the ratio of the waist to the hips, are doing a ton of the heavy lifting. Researchers figure that this region, which is only about 10 to 15% of the body, is a huge focus for our deep-seated evolutionary wiring for attraction.
But what's actually happening inside our brains today when we see these features? Let's jump from our ancient past into modern neuroscience and see how our brains literally light up. This is where attraction becomes something you can actually see. I'm talking about fMRI brain scans. They show that looking at bodies with these specific curves and proportions triggers a rush of dopamine. That's the pleasure chemical, right in the brain's reward center. It's the same part of the brain that gets excited for things we crave, like delicious food or even money. We are neurologically hardwired to find this stuff rewarding.
And this is the point I really want you to get. That spark of attraction, it isn't just some romantic idea. It's a real, measurable, biochemical event that happens almost instantly. Before you even have a chance to think about it, your brain has already flagged these features as valuable and given you a little reward for finding them.
But of course, we don't live in caves anymore. We live in a world just saturated with images, with media, with ideas. So, how does our modern culture play with this ancient biological programming?
There was this fascinating Australian study that shows this perfectly. It found that younger men, guys who grew up more exposed to modern media, tend to prefer slimmer body types. But older men, they often lean towards fuller figures, which aligns more with those traditional biological cues of health and maturity. It's a really clear shift between generations, and it's driven by our environment.
So culture doesn't just erase our biology. Instead, it acts like a magnifying glass. Media especially tends to zoom in and direct our attention to certain areas, like the bust and thighs, which adds a whole other layer to what our society finds attractive. And this accounts for another 10 to 20% of what drives attraction.
Okay, so we've looked at our evolutionary wiring, the brain's chemical response, and the lens of culture. It's time.
Let's put all the pieces together and get to the answer.
Let's recap the evidence. The research suggests our evolutionary programming gets us to focus on the waist, hips, and spine. That's about 10 to 15% of the body. Then, our culture acts like a filter, directing that ancient focus and amplifying the importance of areas like the bust and thighs, which tacks on another 10 to 20%.
And that right there brings us to our final number. When you add it all up, when you see how our biology and our culture interact, the science suggests that a pretty small portion of the body, somewhere between 20 and 40%, centered on the bust, waist, hips, and thighs, is what's driving the majority of that initial physical attraction.
Now, let's be super clear. This does not mean the other 60 to 80% of the body doesn't matter. Not at all. Overall health, symmetry, proportion, those things are still hugely important. But what this research really highlights are the hot spots, the specific areas that our brains, shaped by both nature and nurture, are programmed to notice first and most intensely. And all of this science really leads to one last really interesting question. If we can break down up to 40% of initial attraction into angles and ratios and chemical reactions, what does that say about the other side of the coin? You know, things like personality, humor, shared values. It's a good reminder that while science can explain the initial spark, building the flame, well, that's something else entirely. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.